All right, let's dive in. Ready to explore how to win in this crazy globalized world.
Sounds good to me.
You've given us a ton of info to unpack excerpts from Winning by Jack and Suzy Welch, plus audio from one of their presentations.
Oh, yeah. That's a great book.
So we're talking global competition, building a winning culture, leadership advice.
Straight from source.
Exactly. Straight from two absolute titans of industry.
Yeah. Jack and Suzy Welch have this knack for, breaking down these complex business challenges into something that anyone can understand.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't sugarcoat things either. Like, they really hit you with real-world advice.
I was hooked on their take on global expansion, like right from the start. They really dive into the details of entering these emerging markets, like China and Russia,
Right.
two totally different beasts.
Yeah, absolutely. In a globalized world, scale is like the ultimate weapon.
Right.
And China offers that on a massive scale.
So,
It's attractive to companies because of, well, think about it. Huge markets, low-cost manufacturing, rapidly growing tech talent pool.
and the Welches make a really good point. China, they say, isn't for every company, but it might be for most.
Right, right.
And they really push you to define your criteria, like before you even think about going global.
Yeah.
Like, what are your must-haves?
Yeah.
What are your deal breakers?
Yeah.
Yeah, think about those.
Choosing a foreign market, it really boils down to understanding your risk tolerance,
Yeah.
And the Welches draw this fascinating comparison between China and Russia.
Yeah.
Both have challenges, but they're just different,
Different flavors.
Different flavors of challenges.
Well, and okay, so China, massive potential.
Oh, yeah.
But it also has this surreptitious lawlessness,
Yeah, I remember that.
is how the Welches put it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you think intellectual property rights, that can be a total nightmare.
Oh, it is a minefield.
Yeah, companies have really struggled to protect their patents, trademarks there.
Absolutely.
And then there's Russia, large European market.
Right.
In the midst of this huge economic transformation, huge natural resources, but
Big but.
big but.
Corruption and risk, they're major factors to consider.
Absolutely.
I mean, you've got some experts who say that the legal system there can be unpredictable and that political interference can sometimes be a real problem.
Yeah. So after weighing everything, the Welches ultimately conclude that China has the edge for most investors.
Mm-hmm.
But Russia could be a smart move, but it all depends on your appetite for risk.
Yeah, and that's what's so great about their advice. It's not a one-size-fits-all. They make you think about your specific situation,
Analyze your companies, yeah.
your own company.
Now, get this. They paint this pretty bleak picture of Europe.
Oh, yeah.
They even compare its economic stagnation to the U.S.'s growth.
That's unsettling. Makes you think, for sure. They highlight job creation, as a major difference. Over 35 years, the U.S. created 57 million jobs, while Europe created only 4 million.
Wow, that's a big difference.
Huge.
And they're pretty blunt about Europe's risk aversion, too.
Yeah.
They say it's holding the region back, especially compared to, how the U.S. embraces entrepreneurs and startups.
It raises the question, is Europe's social safety net, which is admirable, possibly hindering innovation and economic dynamism?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It's complex. There are no easy answers. I mean, there's a lot of debate about, government intervention versus a more free market approach.
Yeah. But they don't completely write Europe off.
No,
They
yeah.
see potential in its new generation of business leaders. Right?
Yeah.
And all this dynamism coming out of Eastern Europe. I mean, think about the tech scene in Estonia or those startup hubs popping up all across Poland.
Yeah, exactly.
There's something happening there.
There's energy there.
Yeah.
They see those factors as potential game changers. Their message is that Europe has to adapt.
Yeah.
They need to embrace risk, create a culture that celebrates the people who push boundaries.
Yeah, the ones who are willing to go out there and try something new.
Exactly.
Okay, let's switch gears. Let's talk about building a winning company culture.
Okay.
This comes up again and again in Winning.
Oh, yeah.
They're really adamant about its importance, and they lay out these super clear principles to get there.
They do. They focus on 3 core elements: candor,
Okay.
differentiation,
Uh-huh.
and trust.
Okay, break this down.
So candor means direct, honest communication at all levels. It doesn't matter how tough the conversation is. You got to be upfront and honest.
No sugarcoating.
No sugarcoating. Differentiation. That means recognizing and rewarding your top performers and, this is the hard part, weeding out the underperformers.
It's tough.
Tough decisions, yeah.
Yeah. And trust is about, well, leaders walking the walk, saying what they mean, actually
Right.
doing it. No hypocrisy, no mixed messages.
Yeah, yeah. They believe these three things are fundamental to creating an environment where people can really
I
thrive.
feel like that's like the foundation, right?
Yeah, think of a company's culture like its operating system.
Okay, I like that analogy.
If the operating system is buggy, you know, doesn't matter how talented your people are, you're going to hit a wall at some point.
You're not going to get where you need to go.
Exactly.
So thinking about your current role, how do these principles resonate with you?
Yeah, good question.
Do you see examples of candor, differentiation, and trust in your workplace? It's pretty eye-opening when you start to analyze it, huh?
It is. It is.
Hmm.
One thing that really stood out to me was their emphasis on getting rid of what they call resistors.
Resistors.
Yeah, the people who actively fight change.
Oh, yeah, those people. Ugh. They can be tough.
They are. They're like energy vampires,
Yeah.
you know? They drain the life out of any kind of progress.
Yeah.
It makes sense to, to let them go,
Yeah.
but it can be a really tough call to make.
It is. It can be a really tough call to make.
It takes courage to build a team that's really aligned with the company's goals and values.
It does. It does. Speaking of values, let's talk about the Welch's leadership lessons.
Okay, let's do it.
You've been diving into leadership lately, and winning is like a gold mine of advice on how to be a great boss.
It is. It is.
Not just a manager, but a great boss.
Right. They break down those key traits of a winning leader, and I got to say, it's pretty spot on.
It is. What's first?
Positive energy.
Mm.
It's about bringing that enthusiasm and optimism to the table. They argue that this kind of energy is contagious.
Oh, yeah,
It can inspire a team to accomplish some amazing things.
absolutely. And of course, candor is critical for leaders, too.
Yeah.
They believe that honest feedback, even when it's hard to hear, is essential for growth. It's about, creating a culture where people are comfortable speaking up and challenging the status quo.
Yeah. Having those tough conversations.
Tough conversations, exactly.
It's also big on being tough but fair.
Okay.
It's setting that bar high, holding people accountable, but also being there to support and reward them when they deliver.
Right.
Think back to the best boss you've ever had. Did they embody those traits?
That's a great question to ask.
Yeah.
One thing that got me thinking was their emphasis on the good kind of tough boss.
Right.
The ones who are demanding but fair, the ones who push you, right? Push you to your limits, but they always have your back. There's a fine line between being tough and just being a jerk,
There is a fine line.
and they really get into that.
That's a distinction they make very clearly. A tough boss can get results, but only if they're also fair, supportive, and genuinely invested in their team's development. They give a great example of Bob Nardelli, the former CEO of Home Depot.
Oh, yeah.
He was known for being tough. And while some people criticized his approach, the company's performance significantly improved under his leadership.
It did. It's a good reminder that leadership isn't about being everyone's best friend.
No, it's not a popularity contest.
Sometimes you have to make hard calls. Sometimes you have to deliver difficult feedback.
Yeah.
And you have to hold people accountable.
For sure.
But how you do it, it makes all the difference.
It really does.
If you lack empathy or you fail to build a culture of trust and respect, that toughness is going to backfire.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Big time.
They also talk about what they call the perilous promotion trap.
Oh, yeah, the perilous promotion trap. Tell me about that.
It's that tendency to cling to your old job, even after you've been promoted.
Oh, yeah. Been there. Done that.
We've all been there, right? It's so tempting to stick with what you know, especially when you're feeling a little unsure in a new role. But the Welches are adamant that you need to let go of the past and fully embrace your new responsibilities.
It's tough, but it's necessary.
It is. You got to trust your team,
Delegate.
delegate effectively, and focus on the big picture. You've got to recognize that your role has shifted. You've got to evolve your mindset too.
You can't be doing the same things you were doing before. It's a different role now.
Right, exactly. They also highlight the importance of keeping your people motivated and engaged. And guess what? It's not all about the money.
No. I mean, money's important. It's not all about the money.
Of course, money is important, but it's not the only thing that drives people.
Okay. What else?
They crave recognition, appreciation, a sense of purpose in their work,
Yeah,
the opportunity to learn and grow.
that makes sense.
They even suggest treating your company like a series of labs.
Labs, like science labs.
Yeah, like encourage experimentation, celebrate the successful approaches, and cultivate this culture of continuous learning and improvement. Imagine the possibilities if everyone felt empowered to contribute their ideas, try new things.
Yeah, not be afraid to fail.
Exactly.
Try something new, see if it works.
It's about creating an environment where people feel valued, challenged, and empowered to make a difference.
Hmm.
When you achieve that, motivation becomes less of an issue.
It just happens organically.
It does. It does.
Yeah. Now, one thing that really resonated with me was their take on the not invented here syndrome.
Oh, I hate that.
It's that tendency to dismiss ideas that, come from outside your company or your team.
Ugh, it's an innovation killer.
It's like an innovation killer. It's like, nope, didn't come from here. We're not going to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Welches, they encourage leaders to be open to new ideas, regardless of where they come from.
Right.
You don't have a monopoly on good thinking, you know? And sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected places.
Yeah.
They even share a story about a company that really struggled because they refused to adopt a new technology.
Oh, no.
Simply because it wasn't invented here.
Wow.
They were so focused on protecting their legacy that they missed out on a massive opportunity.
That's a shame. It happens a lot, though.
It does. Think about how many times companies have fallen behind because they were just too resistant to change our new ways of thinking.
Too stuck in their ways. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a reminder that we need to be humble, curious, and always willing to learn from others. They also dive into this sometimes murky world of office politics, that it's not what you know, it's who you know thing.
Office politics. Such a drain on productivity and morale.
The Welches believe that office politics, they thrive in companies that lack transparency and a true meritocracy.
Yeah, for sure.
What's the best way to combat them?
Well, they suggest creating a culture where performance is what really matters. Communication is open and honest.
Yeah.
And decisions are based on facts, not favoritism.
Facts, not feelings.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
They offer a simple but powerful way to assess the health of your company's culture.
Okay, how?
Look to who's getting promoted.
Oh, interesting.
Are they the top performers?
Right?
Or are they the ones who are best at playing the game?
That's pretty telling. Now let's tackle a question that comes up a lot in the sources. What's holding women back in the corporate world? It's complex, but the Welches offer some really interesting insights.
They do. They do. They acknowledge that sexism and bias, they still exist, but they also bring up the impact of biology, especially the fact that women bear children. It's true. Having children often leads to, career interruptions or a shift in priorities for women.
Yeah, for sure.
They argue that this is simply a reality, not necessarily a negative one.
Right.
But it does have implications for career advancement.
Right.
Especially in fields that require, really long hours, constant availability.
Yeah.
It's a topic that sparks a lot of debate.
It does.
And there's no easy answer.
No easy answer.
But they also emphasize that ultimately talent is what matters.
Okay.
If you're a woman who consistently delivers results, most bosses will be willing to offer the flexibility you need to manage family responsibilities.
Right.
But you have to earn that flexibility.
Yeah.
They also talk about the importance of, women supporting each other, mentoring each other.
Yeah.
Creating these networks of support.
Absolutely.
They believe these connections can help women navigate the challenges of balancing work and family.
Yeah, it's like having that support system.
Absolutely. We've seen how powerful those networks can be.
Yeah.
Where women are lifting each other up, creating opportunities for advancement.
Absolutely. And they challenge companies, too.
Right.
They challenge companies to step up to create more family-friendly policies, family-friendly cultures, flexible work arrangements, on-site childcare, generous parental leave. These things can make a huge difference for working parents.
Yeah, and it's not just about, doing the right thing. It's about recognizing that supporting women in the workplace is good for business.
Right. Makes sense.
It leads to a more diverse workforce, a wider range of perspectives, and ultimately better decision-making.
Yeah, everybody wins.
Everybody wins.
Okay, so let's talk about something that might hit close to home for you, making a career change.
Yeah.
The Welches, they dedicate a whole section to dealing with job loss. And it's full of practical advice on how to stay positive, network effectively, and market yourself in, a tough job market. Think of it like a playbook for navigating a challenging transition.
Yeah, I like that. Playbook. They emphasize being upfront about your situation, highlighting what you've learned from your experiences, presenting your skills and abilities in a way that resonates with potential employers.
Yeah.
It's about showcasing your value proposition,
Yeah.
framing your experiences in a positive light.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they encourage you to think outside the box too. Maybe it's time to start your own business, go back to school, explore a new field entirely. Change can be scary, but it can also be, an incredible opportunity for growth and reinvention.
Oh, yeah.
It's about embracing the unknown and seeing it as a chance to learn and grow.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. What about for people who are just starting out?
Oh yeah, they have some great advice for them too.
Yeah. Hmm.
Building a strong foundation, developing a solid work ethic,
Yeah.
finding mentors who can guide you.
Mentors. Yeah.
These are key things.
Okay. And what do they say about finding mentors?
They actually suggest, treating everyone you meet as a potential mentor. Be curious,
Mm-hmm.
ask questions, absorb knowledge from those around you. You never know where you'll find those valuable insights or who might be willing to, champion your growth.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that learning, it's a lifelong journey and there's always something new to discover.
Absolutely.
They encourage, young professionals to be patient, to be persistent. Success doesn't happen overnight. It takes hard work, dedication, and a willingness to learn from your mistakes.
It does. It does. Speaking of mistakes, they have a whole section on dealing with failure.
They do.
And they argue that failure is inevitable, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's how you respond to it that matters.
That's all about how you respond.
So how do they say you should respond?
They encourage you to learn from your failures.
Yeah.
Adjust your course and just keep moving forward.
Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Don't let it get you down.
Resilience. It's one of the most important qualities you can develop in your career.
Yeah, for sure.
It's about bouncing back from setbacks, using them as learning opportunities.
I like that.
They also talk about the importance of self-confidence, believing in yourself. It's essential for achieving success.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't believe in yourself, who will?
Right, exactly.
So how do they recommend building self-confidence?
They recommend setting small goals,
Hmm.
achieving them, and then gradually increasing the difficulty level.
Okay.
It's about building momentum,
Hmm.
proving to yourself that you can handle the challenges.
I like that. Small wins, building on those small wins.
Exactly, exactly. Now, one question that came up in their presentation was, how can a traditional company with, rigid structures and processes adapt to compete in a globalized world?
That's a great question.
It is a great question. It's one that a lot of companies are wrestling with.
They are. They are. What did the Welches say?
The Welches believe that creating a culture of agility and innovation is key.
Oh.
They recommend flattening hierarchies, streamlining those processes, and empowering employees to make decisions.
Yeah.
We've seen companies, successfully implement these ideas by breaking down silos, encouraging that cross-functional collaboration, and giving employees more autonomy to drive change.
Yeah, giving them the freedom to make decisions, take ownership.
Exactly, exactly. And they're also big on embracing technology, too.
Oh, yeah.
Technology can be a powerful tool for breaking down barriers, connecting with customers, and driving growth.
It can be. But it's not just about adopting the latest gadgets, is it?
No, it's not about just, having the shiniest new toy.
Right.
It's about using technology strategically to improve efficiency, enhance communication, and create new products and services that meet, those evolving customer needs.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about a global mindset?
Oh, that's huge.
What do they say about that?
They emphasize the importance of developing a global mindset.
Oh, okay.
Companies need to be aware of cultural differences,
Right.
sensitive to local customs,
Yeah.
and able to adapt their products and services to meet the needs of diverse markets.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to global business.
No,
No.
not at all. It's about recognizing that the world is becoming increasingly interconnected and companies need to be able to compete on a global stage. Now, the Welches, they're not afraid to tackle controversial topics.
They're not. They go right for it.
They do. And one that came up in their book is outsourcing.
Oh, yeah.
Outsourcing.
It's a hot-button issue.
It can be a sensitive subject, especially when it leads to job losses.
It is.
But the Welches, they argue that it's an inevitable part of the global economy.
Okay.
They believe companies need to focus on what they do best and outsource the rest.
Oh, let's play to your strengths.
Exactly. It's about finding the most efficient and cost-effective way to deliver those products and services.
Right. So it's not just about cutting costs.
Right. It's not about, just being cheap.
Yeah.
They also point out that outsourcing can create new opportunities.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Well, for example, if a company outsources its manufacturing, It can free up resources to invest in, research and development or marketing.
Okay. So it can actually lead to growth in other areas,
Exactly. It's about seeing outsourcing as a strategic tool.
not just a way to slash costs.
Right, exactly.
Okay, I like that. Now, one thing I found particularly insightful was their discussion of corporate scandals.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
We can't talk about winning in business without, addressing the ethical side of things.
Absolutely.
Those scandals, they really shook public trust. Companies are still working to rebuild their reputations.
They are, they are.
So what do the Welches say about all this?
Well, they argue that corporate scandals, they're the result of a few bad actors, not a systemic problem with business.
Okay.
They believe that the vast majority of companies operate ethically and responsibly.
So it's not like the whole system is rotten, it's just a few bad apples.
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
Okay.
And they make the point that scandals can be a catalyst for positive change. They can lead to stronger regulations, increased transparency, and a renewed focus on ethics.
So it's like we learn from our mistakes.
Exactly.
Right.
We learn from our mistakes. They talk about building a culture of integrity,
Mm.
where doing the right thing is valued above all else. It's about making ethical behavior a core part of the company's DNA.
Baking it into the cake. So how do you do that?
They recommend that companies create a clear set of values and then communicate them consistently to all employees. They believe that can help prevent those ethical lapses and create a more trustworthy and responsible organization.
So it's all about being proactive.
Proactive, absolutely. And leaders, they need to set the tone at the top,
Yeah. They have to model that ethical behavior, hold themselves and others accountable, and create a culture where people feel comfortable speaking up if they see something wrong.
Yeah, no matter what level they are in the organization.
Exactly, exactly. Now, here's a question that sparks a lot of debate. Is Walmart a force for good or evil in the world?
Oh, boy. Walmart. It's a
Yeah.
company that definitely generates some strong opinions.
It does, it does.
So what side do the Welches fall on? What's their take?
Well, they believe that Walmart is a great company that has had a positive impact on society.
Okay. So a force for good.
They would say so, yeah. They point to the fact that Walmart offers low prices, which benefits consumers, especially, those with limited income.
Right.
It's made a variety of goods accessible to people who might not have been able to afford them otherwise.
That's a good point.
And they also argue that Walmart creates jobs,
Mm.
provides opportunities for advancement, particularly for people without college degrees.
And they believe that Walmart's focus on efficiency and cost cutting has helped keep inflation in check.
So they're good for the economy?
They would argue so, yes.
Okay. But Walmart definitely has its critics, right?
Oh, yeah, they do.
What do those critics say?
Well, they often accuse Walmart of driving small businesses out of business,
Yeah.
exploiting workers and harming communities.
Those are some pretty serious accusations.
Yeah.
What do the Welches say to that?
Well, they believe those criticisms are often unfounded. They believe that Walmart is a tough competitor, but it operates fairly and ethically.
So it's just the nature of competition.
That's what they're saying.
Okay.
And they also make the point that Walmart's been a leader in, sustainability and environmental responsibility.
Oh, interesting.
They've invested heavily in reducing their carbon footprint, promoting sustainable products, supporting local communities.
So they're trying to do the right thing.
They're trying to be a good corporate citizen.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess every company has to find that balance
Right. Absolutely, yeah.
between, being profitable and being responsible. So, what I found really inspiring was their discussion of what it means to win in business.
Yeah, I like that section too.
It's about more than just the bottom line, right?
Exactly. They talk about setting those ambitious goals, pushing yourself to the limits, never giving up.
Never give up.
Never give up.
Mm.
They believe winning is about, creating something meaningful, making a positive impact on the world, leaving a lasting legacy.
I like that.
And they actually define winning as, I love this quote, they define winning as having a healthy, growing, and competitive company, a company where people like coming to work and are proud of what they do. It's about creating that workplace where people feel valued, respected, and inspired to do their best.
It's about creating a company that, that makes a difference in the world.
Yeah, not just for the shareholders, but for its employees, customers, the
Oh.
communities it serves.
Now, here's a question that often comes up. Is business inherently good or bad? What do you think?
Well, the Welches, they're firm believers that business is a force for good.
Okay.
They argue that, business creates jobs,
Hmm.
it drives innovation. It improves, the quality of life for people all over the planet.
So they're pretty optimistic about the role of business.
They are. They're very optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
They also believe that business can be, this really powerful tool for addressing social and environmental challenges.
Okay. So businesses can be part of the solution.
Absolutely. Now, of course, there are, bad actors in every field,
Right.
but they argue that those are the exceptions, not the rule.
Okay.
The vast majority of businesses, they believe, operate ethically and responsibly. They tell this story, actually, about a group of insurance agents who felt ashamed to admit they worked in business after the Enron scandal.
Wow.
It really hit them hard.
Yeah. It's a reminder that, we shouldn't let the actions of a few bad apples, tarnish the reputation of an entire industry.
Absolutely.
So, okay, so the Welches believe business is a force for good.
Yeah, they believe it's a noble profession and that we should be proud of the work we do.
Yeah.
They argue that business has this power to, change the world for the better.
I like that. So let's dive into their perspective on the role of government in business.
Okay.
What do they think?
Well, the Welches believe that the government should create a level playing field for businesses.
Okay.
But they also believe that, the government should avoid excessive regulation.
Okay.
Too much regulation, they argue, can stifle innovation.
Right.
It can make it harder for businesses to compete in the global market.
Yeah. It's a delicate balance.
It is. They believe that, a balanced approach is needed, where the government provides a framework for fair competition,
Mm-hmm.
but doesn't stifle the entrepreneurial spirit that drives innovation.
Makes sense.
They also believe that the government should, invest in education and infrastructure,
Okay.
which can help create a more favorable environment for businesses to thrive.
Yeah.
Now, this came up in their presentation. How can we change things in the United States so we don't have to outsource to India and other countries anymore? This question I think a lot of people are asking.
Yeah, it's on everyone's mind. So what do the Welches say?
Well, they believe that we shouldn't try to stop outsourcing.
Okay.
They see it as, an inevitable part of the global economy and believe it can actually be beneficial for the United States.
Really?
They argue that outsourcing can help, lower costs for consumers, making, goods and services more accessible.
Okay, so it can actually benefit the consumer.
Right.
Okay.
They also believe that outsourcing can free up resources, for companies to invest in research and development,
Mm-hmm.
which could lead to, new products and job creation in other areas.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing?
They believe that outsourcing can actually help create, a more competitive global economy, which ultimately, benefits everyone. It's about adapting to that changing global landscape and recognizing that the flow of work, that's becoming increasingly fluid.
Yeah, work is no longer tied to a specific location.
Exactly. Now, of course, outsourcing can lead to job losses in the short term.
Yeah, that's the concern.
But the Welches, they argue that those job losses are often offset by new jobs created in other sectors.
Okay, so it's about a shift in the job market.
Right, exactly. They believe that the key is to ensure that that American workers have the skills and training they need to compete in the global economy. It's about, investing in education, providing opportunities for retraining,
Mm.
and helping workers adapt to the changing demands of the job market.
Yeah, those skills that are in demand. What I found really interesting was their discussion about the importance of optimism.
Oh, yeah. They're incredibly positive people.
They are. Their energy is contagious.
It is.
What do they say about optimism?
The Welches believe that optimism is, essential for success in business and in life.
Okay.
It's about, having a can-do attitude,
Mm-hmm.
believing in your ability to overcome challenges.
Okay.
They argue that optimists are more likely to take risks. They're more likely to, persevere through challenges
Mm.
and ultimately achieve their goals. They even tell this great story about how President Ronald Reagan's optimism helped, revitalize the American economy in the 1980s.
Oh, yeah.
He faced a lot of skepticism, but his belief in the potential of, the American people, it had a profound impact.
Yeah, that belief can be powerful.
It is powerful, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
a powerful reminder that, a positive attitude can make a world of difference, both for individuals and for entire nations.
Yeah.
Now, in their book, they ask this really interesting question. What are the 3 most critical factors to put in place to turn a company into a preferred employer on a sustained basis?
That's a great question. A lot of companies want to be a preferred employer.
They do.
So what's the answer?
Well, they actually identify 6 key factors: continuous learning, meritocracy, risk-taking, social responsibility, high hiring standards, and profitability and growth.
Wow,
Yeah.
6. Okay, let's break those down. What's the first one again?
Continuous learning.
Mm-hmm.
Preferred employers, they're committed to, continuous learning. They invest in developing their people, with classes, training programs, those offsite experiences.
Mm-hmm.
They recognize that the world is, constantly changing, and their employees need to constantly be learning and growing to stay ahead of the curve.
Okay, so learning is important.
Learning is huge. Second, meritocracy.
Mm-hmm.
Preferred employers are, true meritocracies.
So what does that mean?
It means that, pay and promotions, they're tightly linked to performance.
Mm-hmm.
They have these rigorous appraisal systems that consistently let people know where they stand.
Mm.
It's about creating that culture of, fairness and transparency, where everyone knows the rules of the game and how to succeed. Third, risk-taking. Preferred employers, they don't just allow people to take risks. They actually celebrate those who do, and they don't punish those who fail, trying.
Okay.
They understand that failure is a part of innovation and that a fear of failure can, stifle creativity and progress.
Uh-huh.
They encourage their employees to experiment, try new things, and learn from their mistakes.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the fourth one?
Social responsibility. Preferred employers, they understand that what's good for society is also good for business. Gender, race, nationality, they're never limitations.
Okay.
Everyone's ideas matter. Preferred employers, they're diverse and global in their outlook and environmentally sensitive in their practices. They offer flexibility in work schedules to those who earn it, with performance. They're enlightened companies. They understand the importance of creating, a workplace that reflects the diversity of the world we live in.
Yeah. So they're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk.
Exactly. Fifth, high hiring standards. Preferred employers, they keep those hiring standards high.
Yeah.
They make candidates work hard. They, require a challenging interview process and strict criteria around intelligence and previous experience.
Okay, so they don't just let anyone in.
They're looking for the best and brightest. They're willing to invest the time and effort to find them.
Makes sense. And the final one?
Profitability and growth.
Ah, yes, the bottom line.
Preferred companies are profitable and growing. The rising stock price is a real hiring magnet, Beyond that, only thriving companies can promise you a future, with career mobility and the potential of increased financial reward.
Yeah.
They understand that to attract and retain top talent, they need to offer competitive compensation and benefits, as well as, opportunities for professional growth and development.
Yeah. You want to work for a company that's going places.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The Welches believe that, becoming a preferred employer, it's a journey, not a destination. It takes time, effort, and a commitment to creating, a workplace where people want to be. It's about creating an environment where people feel, valued, respected, and inspired to do their best. It's about, building a company that makes a difference in the world, not just for its shareholders, but for its employees, customers, the communities it serves.
Now let's talk about a topic that's, close to the Welch's heart's candor.
They're huge believers in the power of candor, and they argue that it's essential for creating, a high-performing organization.
Okay, so they're big on being honest and upfront.
Absolutely. They believe that candor, it allows for, open and honest communication, which leads to, better decision-making, a more efficient, effective organization. They also argue that candor helps, build that trust and respect among team members.
Okay.
When people feel like they can, speak their minds freely and openly without fear of retribution.
Right.
It creates, a more positive and productive work environment.
So you're not walking on eggshells.
Exactly. Now, of course, candor can be difficult.
Yeah, uncomfortable.
It can be uncomfortable for sure to give and receive, critical feedback.
Yeah.
Especially in a workplace setting.
Right. Nobody wants to hurt anyone's feelings.
It takes courage, to be honest, both with yourself and with others. But the Welches argue that it's essential for growth and improvement. If you're not getting honest feedback, you're not going to know where you need to improve. And if you're not giving honest feedback, you're not helping your team members reach their full potential.
Yeah.
They recommend that companies make candor a core value and that leaders model that candid behavior. It's about setting the tone from the top, making it clear that honesty and transparency, those are valued within the organization. They believe that a culture of candor can transform an organization. It can lead to better decision-making, increased innovation, and a more, engaged and productive workforce.
So candor is really a key ingredient.
It's essential.
Yeah.
But, what about those who don't embrace candor? How do you deal with, the people who are resistant to being open and honest?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Well, the Welches argue that you need to be firm but fair, give people a chance to, adjust their behavior.
Oh.
Some people, they might just need a little time to get used to a more, candid culture. But, if they continue to resist, you may need to, let them go.
Hmm.
They believe that a culture of candor is so important that it's worth losing a few people who don't buy in. It's about creating that high-performing team, that's aligned around this shared commitment to honesty and transparency.
Another topic that's close to their hearts is differentiation.
Okay, so we talked about candor, now differentiation.
They're strong proponents of differentiation. They believe it's essential for creating a high-performing organization.
So remind me, what's differentiation again? It allows you to reward your top performers
Yep.
and hold your, underperformers accountable. It's about recognizing that not all employees are, created equal,
Yeah.
and that rewarding high performers can help, motivate them to continue to excel.
Okay, so it's about recognizing and rewarding those who go above and beyond.
Exactly.
Okay.
They also argue that differentiation helps to create, a sense of fairness and motivation among team members. When people see that hard work, high performance is rewarded, it creates a more positive, productive work environment. Now, of course, differentiation, it can be controversial.
Yeah, I can see that.
Some people argue that it's, unfair,
Mm.
or that it creates this culture of competition that can be toxic.
Right, right. Competition can be good, but it can also be really cutthroat.
Exactly. But the Welches, they argue that differentiation is essential for success. They believe that the best companies are the ones that are willing to, differentiate their employees and to reward those who contribute the most to the organization's success.
Okay, so they're not afraid to make those tough calls.
No, not at all. They actually recommend that companies implement, a forced ranking system where, employees are ranked from best to worst.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
It is intense. It's a controversial topic, with some companies finding it to be an effective way to identify and reward those high performers, while others find it to be, demotivating and counterproductive. It's definitely a system that needs to be, implemented carefully with clear criteria and a focus on fairness and transparency.
Yeah, you have to be very careful with that.
Absolutely. The Welches, they believe that differentiation is essential for creating that winning culture. It's about recognizing and rewarding excellence and creating a workplace where people, they're motivated to do their best. Now let's talk about a, foundational element, trust.
Okay, trust. That's a big one.
It is a big one. The Welches believe that trust is like the foundation of any successful organization.
Okay. So it's really important.
Oh, it's essential. It's the glue that holds everything together.
So how do they describe trust?
They argue that, trust allows for that open and honest communication,
Right.
which, leads to better decision making, a more efficient and effective organization.
Right.
And, they also argue that trust helps to create this sense of camaraderie and teamwork, among team members.
Okay, yeah.
When people trust each other, they're more likely to cooperate, they're more likely to, help each other out and to work together towards common goals.
So it creates a more positive environment.
Exactly. Now, of course, trust, it's, hard to earn, easy to lose.
It is. It is.
It takes time and effort to build trust. And it can be destroyed in an instant. It's about being consistent in your actions, being honest in your communication, following through on your commitments.
Yeah.
But the Welches, they argue that, it's essential for creating a high-performing organization.
So you got to have trust.
You got to have trust. When people trust each other, they're more likely to take risks. They're more likely to, innovate and go the extra mile.
They're not afraid to put themselves out there.
Exactly. Exactly. They recommend that, companies make trust a core value and that leaders model that trustworthy behavior. It's about setting that tone from the top, making it clear that trust, it's a non-negotiable part of, the organization's culture.
So it has to be baked into the DNA of the company.
Yeah, exactly. Now, so how do you build trust in an organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. What do they say?
The Welches, they offer several suggestions. First, they recommend that leaders be transparent and honest in their communication. They need to be upfront with their employees about the company's challenges and successes, and they need to be willing to answer those tough questions honestly and directly. Second, they recommend that leaders be, consistent in their actions. They need to do what they say they're going to do, and they need to treat everyone, fairly and with respect.
So actions speak louder than words.
Actions speak louder than words,
Yeah.
absolutely. Third, they recommend that leaders be, fair and equitable in their treatment of employees. They need to make sure that, that everyone is treated fairly and that decisions are made based on merit, not favoritism. And fourth, they recommend that leaders be willing to, admit their mistakes, take responsibility for their actions.
That's tough sometimes.
It is tough, but, no one is perfect.
Right.
Leaders need to be willing to own up to their mistakes and learn from them.
And show that to their employees that it's okay to make mistakes.
Exactly. They believe that these actions can help, to build trust and create a more positive and productive work environment. Now, let's turn our attention to a topic that's at the heart of any successful organization: leadership.
Okay, leadership, another big one.
It is a big one. The Welches, they believe that leadership is the most important factor in determining the success of an organization. They argue that, that great leaders have this ability to inspire and motivate their teams to achieve great things.
Okay.
They also believe that great leaders have the ability to, to create this vision for the future and to align their teams around that vision. They're the ones who can articulate, where the organization is going, why it's going there, and they're the ones who can rally people around that common purpose. Now, of course, leadership is a complex topic.
It is.
There are, many different styles of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And what works for one leader, it may not work for another. It depends on the individual, the situation, the organization.
So there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
No, not at all. But the Welches, they offer some general principles of leadership that they believe are kind of universal.
Okay.
First, they argue that, great leaders, they're passionate about their work and about their people.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just in it for the money or the power.
Mm.
They genuinely care about, what they do and about the people they work with.
Yeah. You can kind of tell when someone's not really passionate about their work.
Oh, yeah. You can tell.
It shows.
It shows. Absolutely.
So what's the second principle?
Second, they argue that, great leaders, they're decisive
Okay.
and they have the courage to make those tough decisions.
Yeah.
They're not afraid to make, unpopular decisions if they believe it's in the best interests of the organization.
So they're not afraid to ruffle some feathers.
No, they're not afraid to make the hard calls. Third, they argue that great leaders are good communicators
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
and are able to articulate their vision in a way that inspires others.
Yeah.
They can paint a picture of, the future that people can buy into.
Right.
And they can communicate their ideas in a way that's clear, concise, compelling. And fourth, they argue that great leaders, that they're humble and they're willing to learn from, their mistakes. They don't, pretend to have all the answers.
Right.
And they're open to feedback and suggestions from others.
Yeah.
They believe that these qualities are essential for creating a winning culture.
Yeah.
Now, a question that comes up, often is, are leaders born or made?
Oh, the age-old question. What do they say?
The Welches, they believe that, leadership is a combination of nature and nurture. They argue that, some people, they're born with those natural leadership qualities, but, that anyone can develop leadership skills with hard work and dedication. It's about, developing your self-awareness, your emotional intelligence, your communication skills.
So it's something you can work on.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
They recommend that companies invest in leadership development programs to help, their employees develop their leadership potential.
Yeah.
They believe that leadership is too important to be left to chance.
Yeah, you have to be proactive about developing leaders.
Absolutely. Now, another critical aspect of leadership is hiring the right people.
Right.
The Welches believe that, hiring the right people, it's the most important decision a leader can make.
Yeah, that makes sense. Your team is everything.
It is. Great employees are the foundation of any successful organization.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who, they do the work, they drive that innovation, they create the value.
Mm-hmm.
But hiring the wrong people, man, it can be incredibly costly,
Yeah.
both in terms of, lost productivity and damage to morale.
And it can take a long time to recover from a bad hire.
It can.
So what do they say about hiring?
Hiring, it's a complex process
Mm-hmm.
with many factors to consider. And there's no guarantee, that someone's going to be a good fit for your organization.
Right.
But the Welches, they offer some general principles of hiring that they believe are essential.
Okay, what are they?
First, they argue that, you should hire for attitude and train for skills.
Okay, so attitude is more important than skills.
They believe that, skills can be taught, but, attitude it's something it's much harder to change. They're looking for people who are, positive, enthusiastic, eager to learn.
They want people who are excited to be there.
Exactly, exactly. Second, they argue that you should look for people who are, smart, energetic, and passionate about, their work. They want people who are, who are excited to come to work every day
Yeah.
and who are always looking for ways to improve.
So people who are always trying to learn and grow.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Third, they argue that you should look for people who are, team players and who are willing to go, the extra mile.
Okay.
They want people who are, willing to help each other out and who are committed to the success of the team.
Not just looking out for themselves.
Exactly.
Okay.
And fourth,
They argue that you should look for people who are, honest, ethical, and have a strong work ethic. They believe that these qualities are, essential for building a strong and sustainable organization. It's like building a house, right? You need a solid foundation, but how do you find these people? How do you know if someone is truly honest and ethical?
the Welches recommend a rigorous hiring process.
Yeah.
One that includes multiple interviews, reference checks, and even background checks.
Yeah, you really got to do your due diligence.
Absolutely. And they also recommend using, behavioral interview questions to assess how candidates have handled, challenging situations in the past.
So you can see how they think on their feet.
Exactly.
Mm.
It's about getting a sense of their decision-making process, their values, their ability to handle pressure. They believe that a, thorough hiring process is essential for finding the best people and building, a high-performing team.
It's worth the effort to get it right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about, the glue that holds it all together, culture.
Okay, culture. What do they say about that?
The Welches believe that culture is the soul of an organization. It's what defines the company, what sets it apart from its competitors, what attracts and retains top talent.
So it's kind of like the company's personality?
It's exactly a strong culture.
Yeah.
It creates a sense of shared purpose, values, beliefs, among employees.
Right. So everyone's on the same page, working towards the same goal.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment where people, feel like they belong, where they're valued, and where they're excited to, come to work every day.
Yeah, you want to create a place where people actually want to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, culture is a complex topic, and, what works for one company, it may not work for another.
Right. It's going to be a good fit.
It does. It's about finding, the right balance between structure and flexibility,
Okay.
between, individual autonomy and teamwork, and between, tradition and innovation.
So it's about finding that sweet spot.
Exactly. But the Welches, they offer some general principles of culture building that they believe are, essential.
Okay. What are those principles?
Well, first, leaders need to, define and articulate the company's values. What are the core beliefs that, guide the organization? What are the behaviors that are expected of employees?
So it's about being really clear about what the company stands for.
Exactly. Second, leaders need to model the desired behaviors.
So they can't just talk the talk, they got to walk the walk.
Exactly. Employees are watching their leaders and, they're more likely to adopt the desired behaviors if they see their leaders living them out.
So lead by example.
Exactly. Third, leaders need to create a system of rewards and recognition that reinforces, the desired behaviors.
Okay, so it's not enough to just say what the values are. You have to actually reward people for living them.
Exactly. It's about recognizing and rewarding employees who live the company's values and who, contribute to the organization's success. And fourth, leaders need to be consistent in their enforcement of the company's values.
So you can't let bad behavior slide.
Exactly. You can't, let things slip or the culture will erode. It's about setting clear expectations and holding people accountable for, their actions.
So consistency is key.
Consistency is key. These actions, they can help create a strong and positive culture that attracts and retains, top talent, drives innovation, and leads to, long-term success. But what if you inherit a culture that needs some serious work? How do you change a company's culture?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Culture can be really hard to change.
It can be. But the Welches argue that, changing a company's culture is a difficult but not impossible task.
Okay, so it can be done.
It can be done. It takes time, effort, and a commitment from, the top down.
So everyone has to be on board.
Everyone has to be on board. They recommend a, multi-pronged approach that includes communication training and rewards and recognition.
So it's a holistic approach?
It is
Yeah.
leaders need to, communicate the desired culture clearly and consistently.
Right.
They need to, train employees on the new values and behaviors, and they need to reward and recognize employees who are, living the desired culture.
So it's about reinforcement, positive reinforcement.
Exactly. It's about creating a sense of urgency and making it clear that, the old way of doing things is no longer acceptable.
So it's a clean break from the past.
It is. Leaders also need to be, patient and persistent as it takes time to change a company's culture.
Right. You can't expect it to happen overnight.
Exactly. It's not going to happen overnight. It's about, consistently reinforcing those desired values and behaviors,
Okay.
and it's about celebrating, those small wins along the way.
Yeah, those small wins can really add up.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into winning by Jack and Suzy Welch.
That was a great discussion. I learned a lot about their approach to business and leadership.
Me too.
Yeah.
They offer a lot of valuable insights that are, still relevant today.
Absolutely. Their emphasis on candor differentiation, building trust, and creating a winning culture, it's all really important stuff.
And their advice on, finding the right people, developing leaders, and executing your strategy, it's all really practical and actionable.
Yeah, they don't just talk about theory, they give you concrete steps you can take to improve your business and your career.
Exactly. And they remind us that, business can be a force for good in the world.
I like that it's not just about making money, it's about making a difference.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Jack and Suzy Welch.
We hope you found it valuable, and we'll see you next time.